Leviathan, 2014 Russian film, was nominated for the Foreign Language Oscar that year, despite the controversy it caused back in Russia itself. The government, which provided partial funding, was very unhappy with the portrayal of regular Russian people, saying it was too unglamorous with all the drinking and hopelessness and so on. The film was originally inspired by the story of Marvin Heemeyer, an American man who had an auto repair shop and got into conflict with the local authorities of his town that wanted to build a cement manufacturing plant right next door to his property. There were some issues with land ownership and so on. And after numerous appeals failed, he ended up using an armored bulldozer to destroy a couple of buildings, including the town hall, and then he shot himself. So, and also in a wider sense, Leviathan, this film, can also be interpreted as a modern reimagining of the biblical story of Job, and also the title Leviathan itself is a Bible reference as well. The story centers around Kolya, this middle-aged car mechanic living in a small town in northern Russia with his wife and a son from his previous marriage. They live modestly, small house right on the coast. Kolya built it himself in a pretty picturesque spot. At the beginning of the film, Kolya's friend and lawyer from Moscow arrives in town to help fight a legal battle against the authorities that want to demolish the house, take over the land, officially to build a telecommunications center, but in reality, everybody knows it's only so that the shady mayor of the town can take over the land for himself and build a mansion or whatever. And initially, the lawyer's arrival seems hopeful, but quickly it turns out that it may actually be a trigger to a series of much more unfortunate events for Kolya and his family. So, as I said at the beginning, it very much resembles the story of Job in the way that the main character is basically tortured over the course of the story and has everything he cares about taken away from him one by one. Only in this particular scenario, the role of God as the force behind the tragedies is taken by the mayor. That grounds the story and it gives it a more postmodern tone. It adds a layer of societal commentary that I think applies universally, but particularly well for Russia itself. The commentary on corrupt government officials, on how people in power, in positions of power, abuse that power without regard for regular folk, and their hypocrisy. And it's not even people in absolute power. I mean, you get the sense that the mayor himself is not this huge figure. He's just a local asshole. But even this limited amount of power is more than enough in this isolated environment. I think that this shift of the main source of misery from this god, untouchable figure to another human being serves the story well because it's not just suffering for suffering's sake. It says something about the human nature. Even more so as the mayor himself is not the only source of misery for the characters. The characters themselves do plenty to worsen their situation. Cheating, alcoholism, the sort of small town resignation and hopelessness that permeates the characters of the story. And that contrasts, well, I'm not sure if contrast is actually the right word. I mean to speak about cinematography because it is damn pretty and it features many wide, sweeping shots of the seaside Russian landscape, which on the one hand does contrast with the close nature type of story, which in all aspects, like geographical, philosophical, and so on, it takes place in a very small and limited world from which there is no escape, because the camera shows us this huge world with faraway horizon. That's where the contrast comes from. But on the other hand, the landscapes also do fit because that world is still very much cold and unwelcome, desolate even. So it is a fitting setting for this type of story. Final point I wanted to make really quickly about the performances, which are all very good across the board, completely convincing and natural. So yeah, I think Leviathan is a pretty solid film. It's harrowing and depressing, yes, but it makes several good points about human nature in terms of both causing the suffering and dealing with it as its recipient. Good stuff.